What does it say of the quality of men around the president?
Bootlickers, court jesters, sycophants, and men lacking in scruples. That's who they are. They don't care about posterity. They don't know the street called patriotism. They don't know the boulevard called commitment to common good. They don't care about our nation. And it's sad that our children will read about these men and also wonder what we did. That's how it bothers me, because, and that's why they are gradually and surreptitiously depleting the rights of the people to opposition, depleting the rights of the people to get justice from the courts. Because here, the National Assembly has pledged loyalty to the president, and so has the judiciary. You're aware that never in our history have we seen the judiciary proudly commit itself to the whimsical tendencies of the executives. And sad enough that the minister of the FCT is proudly telling us that he's building houses for magistrate, judges, and the likes. That's how sickening, I repeat, that's how sickening it is. That's how much of a tummy rot we have on our hands.
Our guest, as always, a delight at any point in time that you have him around, is the convener, Country First Movement, Chris Nwaokobia Jr. On a lighter note, one businesswoman, Tracy O'Hiri, alleged arrest, detention, intimidation, and even attempts to move her to Kefi prison. What does this say about how the Nigerian state is sometimes deployed against ordinary Nigerians, citizens who challenge the powers that be?
No, I think that there's a problem with the character and the tendencies that we have in leadership. And I'm speaking seriously. If they are not patriarchies, they are oppressors. If they are not oppressors, they lack decency and decorum. If they don't lack decency and decorum, they lack empathy and sympathy. And that's a tragedy of our nation. Very sadly so. From the Senate president and his runs with Natasha and his battles with Natasha, depicting a terrible sense of patriarchy, to the chauvinism that you see in the statements of men in and around power. The patriarchy displayed by Wike, who referred to a 7th senator as one who reads love novels and so does not understand what is happening in Abuja. And then to a sickening tendencies of the sickening tendencies of the Minister of Works regarding the Ohiri matter. He did not only descend to the gutters when he talked about he's not having anything to, if it were Natasha that said, I don't understand how the character and the tendencies of this man. And I told somebody like Wike, like Umahi, like Akpabio, men who disregard and disrespect women, men whose patriarchy is Olympic, men who lack courtesy and scruples. And then when you go to the other extent, you ask yourself, okay, for whatever it's worth, the woman has come out with pictures and photographs of herself and Umahi in Umahi's office whilst he was governor. She's come out with evidence of transactions that they had in time past. And must you oppress, intimidate, harass and harangue the low? Where lies your sympathy, your emotion, and your empathy? And then to think of the fact that they wanted to abduct her, I want to use the word abduct her from the hospital, bemoans logic. And I think that Mr. President should talk to men around him. If he respects women, then he should tell them to learn to respect women. If he cares about people, he should tell them to learn to respect people. Because it's not only bad enough that we have a government that is lacking in empathy and sympathy and concern for the masses. It's worse when you think of the fact that the men around the president and men of power do not care about decency, decorum, do not care about how they appear. before our young daughters, how they appear before women. And that's why I think that the time has come for women groups and rights to rise up and defend their kind. You know, we mustn't always be the ones speaking for them. They should rise up. And I was appalled by the fact that there was a female journalist where Wike referred to Ireti Kingibe as someone who reads love novels rather than attend to issues about the FCT. And I'm also appalled with the fact that a woman in a bad shape was going to be abducted under the orders of the serving Minister of Works. I think the messiness, I think the whole thing about our state and our nation, you know, is sickening. From politics to the character of men of power, from the character of men of power to the fact that some men are happy that they are depleting the rights of the opposition. And so you ask them, what really will you tell posterity? That under you, democracy lost its bite. That under you, a National Assembly leader, the President of the Senate, comes out to pledge loyalty to the President against the provision of a Constitution. And you know what, Victor? What will bother you is the fact that in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the legislature comes before the executive and the judiciary. Are you aware?
Yep, because they are the heartbeat of democracy.
Representatives of the people. They are the ones to call the executive to order. And under Akpabio Senate, the National Assembly pledges loyalty to the executive. That's how sickening and sad this drama is. And I pray for our country.
What does it say of the quality of men around the president?
Bootlickers, court jesters, sycophants, and men lacking scruples. That's who they are. They don't care about posterity. They don't know the street called patriotism. They don't know the boulevard called commitment to common good. They don't care about our nation. And it's sad that our children will read about these men and also wonder what we did. That's how it bothers me, you know, because, and that's why they are gradually and surreptitiously depleting the rights of the people to opposition, depleting the rights of the people to get justice from the courts. Because here, the National Assembly has pledged loyalty to the president. And so has the judiciary. You're aware that never in our history have we seen the judiciary proudly commit itself to the whimsical tendencies of the executives. And sad enough that the Minister of the FCT is proudly telling us that he's building houses for magistrate, judges, and the likes. That's how sickening, I repeat, that's how sickening it is. That's how much of a tummy rot we have on our hands.
Some persons have said that in civilized climes, the Minister of Works, having said he has never seen that lady, and now there are empirical data to prove that he's not just seeing, he knows her too well. And then the role that have been played by the Nigerian police. In all of this, in civilized crimes, what should have happened by now?
Victor, are they not all liars? Quote me. Are they not all liars? The Minister of the FCT will tell you that he did not instruct or he did not decree a public holiday. Did you work in Abuja on the Friday before the FCT elections? That was a public holiday. It was not declared on network by Mr. President. He was the one who announced it. They all lie. They have raised falsehood and perfidy to Olympic heights. It has become an act of state. I just told you, the Minister of Works denied everything about knowledge with knowledge of the Ohiri lady. And then facts, photographs, and data has come to contradict it. They lie barefacedly. They lie shamelessly. And that's how much of a tragedy we have on our hands. Men who are lacking in scruples. You know, I said this with every sense of commitment, and it pains me that we have children who are watching where state operators have raised falsehood, perfidy, mendacity, debauchery, and deceit to an act of state, Victor. For them, it's so long as it suits them at that moment. They lie today, they tell another lie tomorrow, and it doesn't bother them. We have had so many lies. And then let me even make you laugh. One of the most sickening, I called somebody the other day and I said, were we not told that the Lagos Calabar Coastal Road will be a 6-laner both ways? Have you seen a 3-laner both ways? Oh my God, I don't know how to describe these people. They lie on paper, lie before you and I, lie to their children, and they just don't care. We've never had it this bad. I worry for my future. I worry for the future of our children. I worry for posterity because we're growing children who will look at us in the face and they think that falsehood, lying, and perfidy is honorable. When those who have public trust in other climes, these men should resign and quit office because, like Caesar's wife, a man in leadership should be above board. But unfortunately, they seem to want to outwit each other in falsehood and perfidy. Victor, lying, falsehood, perfidy, debauchery, mendacity, and perfidy has become an act of state under this man of power.
Some persons argue that defamation and cybercrime laws have been weaponized. It's now a very potent weapon in the hands of the leaders. What do you say of it?
Who's scared of facing liars? I think that weaponized against, permit my choice of words, cowards. Victor, in a few days I'll be 55. Of my 55 years on earth, I've spent close to 9 years in one custody or the other. So perhaps I can pass for a veteran in honorary suffering. And like my mentor, Martin Luther King Jr. would say, honorary suffering is indeed redemptive. I don't care what they say, so long as I stand on the altar of God and truth. They will, I don't tap nobody's phones, but I hear them when they lie. I see them when they lie. I read them when they tell falsehood. Don't forget my series. What is the caption? Of forgery, fakery, and fallacies. That's what they do. They lie against God, against man. They lie to the people and their children. They lie against truth, and they lie to posterity. So, if they like, it's got to be their word against my word. A man denied ever meeting a woman. She has come out with not AI-generated pictures that date back to when he was a governor. So he's a liar. In other climes, they will ask him to quit office. Then the other one says, I did not declare a public holiday. Mr. President asked me to. I did not declare curfew. We all live in Abuja. They lie shamelessly. And I think that the time has come for the media to speak up and be forthright. Then interestingly, the time has come for the churches that allow them, because I see some of these people in the pew, they talk from their pulpits. They should stop them, knowing that these men lie against God and against mankind. There should be some kind of moral regeneration. If we care about our children, and I wonder what bothers me, and I pity his children. I'm talking clearly now about Wike. Where he goes out to lie, he goes with his sons. And I see them standing behind him. And I say, what kind of future? What kind of future are we creating? And then you see the man who said, that he's a pastor or a deacon. Umahi is of the Christ Embassy. I don't know what, but you remember his story. And then when you see them lie, they even have smiles on their faces. And I said to them, maybe they have all sold their soul to the devil. I know. But it bothers me.
All right, let's look at the off-cycle elections. What would you call what we've seen so far? A democracy or elite selection?
I don't know where to start from, Victor. I haven't lost faith in Nigeria. I haven't lost faith in Nigeria, but I am truly bothered. I haven't lost faith in posterity, but I'm truly bothered. I haven't lost faith in the future, but I'm truly bothered, Victor. And I have told young people who reach out to me that rather than agonize, we must organize. But I'm truly, truly worried, Victor. I'm not worried because the power of those in power is mightier than the power of a people. I'm worried because the people are largely and increasingly losing faith in their strength and in their power. You know, for us to have seen what became of the area council elections, I first will admit that the opposition has shown that we have a lot of lessons to learn in politics. Ditto the kind of candidates and their support bases and the structures that we deploy. And here I'm speaking deeply. We must learn to take our politics strongly and to the grassroots. Do more of concrete mobilization. Yes, the opposition has a lot to learn from it and do. But when you begin to see figures and numbers from various places that are mutilated, result sheets that are doctored and so poorly done, and they're admitted and scored. When you see people celebrate and salute it because it suits certain tendencies, I worry. That's where my worry is from. I am not disappointed that people won or that they lost. What bothers me is how they won and how they lost. I am also very concerned about what lessons we must learn and what it portends with 2027 just ahead of us. This is the test case, if you like, for the rigging of 2027 elections. That's why I'm worried. This is a test case, if you like, for the surreptition of the strategies and its people. You know, you saw the Electoral Act, you saw the clauses, and you saw the proviso. The Nigerian people asked for premium time, record time transmission of results. They came with the proviso. Whereas, Victor, we were told long ago that the beavers does not necessarily need networks to transmit elections, that they are all built in. Like the bank network, they are all built in. You do your transaction in the network, intra-network, not inter-network. The beavers is hooked naturally to the server, to the IRF. And so when you transmit, when you leave the location where there's service issues, it will definitely get to the IRF. So what you understand, if INEC has said that at several fora, then why are the National Assembly representatives of the people deceiving, deluding, and lying to us? You know, there's something to worry about, really. The first point to worry about is that those who pretend our democracy today are not mindful of the word called integrity or character. And it doesn't matter to them whether the electoral process is compromised, shortchanged, and whether the people doubt the credibility of the electoral process. And let me tell you, you know, the apathy we saw in the local government area council elections in Abuja further rehearses that those words of Stalin, I think it was Stalin who made that quote popular, that necessarily it is not the votes that counts, but the one who counts the vote that matters.
I think that's Plato.
In that how sad it has become. So the people are internalizing that belief and faith, sadly. The people are beginning to believe that I have no reason for which to go out to vote. People are beginning to worry about the future of the entire process. And I have always said that congruent with democracies is the freedom of the electoral process. If the electoral process is not free and fair, then democracy lacks substance and credibility. You cannot call it a democracy, you know. And sadly, those who pretend the nation today do not care whether what we have is democratic, so long as men in mufti rather than men in khaki, so long as they get themselves back to power through less than proper means, it doesn't matter to them. And now they have struggled to etch electoral larceny as part of the electoral law. I said a few days ago in a sister station that my pity is for Amopiton and his INEC, where the new law gives him an alibi and an excuse for failure. Then you ask yourself, which people have done this? It is those who know that they cannot win free and fair elections. They are parachiks and supporters of Mr. President who are standing on a collapsing mandate. Those who are in the National Assembly who do not care about whether our democracy is threatened. Those who do not care about how badly they have narrowed down the frontiers of democracy. Those who do not care about the future of our country. And those who put before us an electoral act that does not carry the aspirations of the people. They're the ones who are in cahoots with Mr. President in the effort to rig the 2027 elections. And Victor, I say without fear of querulous critics, that if nothing is done now, 2027 election stands rigged. And sadly so.
Why do you think so?
Clearly, from the Electoral Act to the nuances and the character and the body language of those who pretend the presidency, and to the fact that, Victor, think about it. If previous elections have been rigged, is it an election that you're giving to the umpire a reason to fail? The old Electoral Act provides for 1 year, 12 months before the next election for funds to be released. The new one provides for 6 months. An alibi, an excuse for failure. The old Electoral Act gives you a longer time for campaigns. As you and I talk, the ruling party is campaigning across board. You see their movements. Some are called city boy, some are called ambassadors. They are all on air campaigning. The opposition doesn't have a candidate yet, and rather than give sufficient time, you narrow down the period and the time for campaigns. All parts of rigging the whole process. Then extend to the fact that the same party that called for electronic voting and transmission of results in 2015, after 11 years, are saying that the nation cannot transmit election results premium time. What does that tell you? They are not interested in transparency of the electoral process. They are not interested in the credibility of the electoral process. They just fought Jonathan for the reasons of getting to power. They had no scruples, no conscience, no soul. And that's why 11 years after they advocated for premium time transmission of election results, 11 years after they asked for electronic transmission of results, 11 years after they asked for decorum and decency in the electoral process, they have made it worse. The Electoral Act under them gives you, rather than give fight, fire, and strength to the aspirations of the people, has come to narrow down the latitude for transparency of the electoral process. And that's how sickening and sad it is. So I talk to you, and I, with deep pain in my heart, pain in several ways. Pain in the fact that we have people who answer His Excellency who are far from excellence. Pain in the fact that we have people who call themselves distinguished senators who by no means are distinguished. Pain in the fact that we have people who call themselves honorable lawmakers who are absolutely dishonorable. Pain in the fact that we have people who should concern themselves about how our country gets out of a nadir out of poverty, disease, and despondency. But very unfortunately, nobody seems to care no more, and people are there singing the praises of a failing watch. And I am deeply worried, Victor, worried that the ruling party, almost on the last count, has about 31 governors in its fold. Whereas our country, our people are hungrier than they were yesterday. The spate of insecurity, almost one day after another, we have Nigerians being mowed down by non-state actors, and you have human barbecues everywhere. And so I ask myself, for what reason are these people decamping? Have they done so well? Has the APC made Nigeria a fantastic place? What is the logic? And Victor, it hurts when you find out that the logic is all about self-survival, political survival of these men. And why are they worried? Why do they think that their survival is hinged to the presidency? Because they know that the election, ditto the new Electoral Act, stands rigged. And so they all want to rig along with Mr. President. That's the tragedy of now. And I hope something gives, Victor.
All right, let's wrap up on the FCT elections. Some persons have argued that the announcement before the election may or may not have impacted on the outcome of the elections. And there are also those that argue that what the FCT minister said, he will only support those who support the president. If you don't support him, he will not support you, presupposes that probably the election result had been written somewhere and waiting for the final day. What's your take on this?
Everything that happened before that election was tailored towards the results that you saw. It was about 2 years before I attempted the presidency in 2011 that I was drinking with a few friends, and I said that the Nigerian electoral process is such that, we have a way with pidgin. I grew up in Sapla in Delta State. So there's something we call ururu, treachery, you know. And I said then that what we have in the electoral regime of our nation is wuru to the answer. You have the answer, you now play the whole script to the answer. So everything we saw before that area council election was orchestrated. The tapestry was clear. You just stated it. When the minister of the FCT comes out to say that go and vote and leave the rest to me, what does this presuppose? And then he comes out again to say that he will not support anybody who does not support Mr. President. What does it presuppose? And he boasts that only those who support Mr. President will win. Is it the voter? Is it the collating agency? And you worry. It's about wuru to the answer, and that's what they did. Now, for me, what bothers me even deeper is not the fact that we saw that game play out, and the opposition also, unfortunately, played into in the choice of candidates, in representing and reflecting the nuances and the expectations of the people. Because again, we must learn to be very politically sagacious. If we want to take out a ruling party that is not performing, we also must look at the nuances and the expectations of the people. I want to say with all sense of respect that we must, as the opposition, learn to deepen the frontiers of our politics. But that is not an excuse for manipulation of the electoral process, which in the present instance, the ruling party has done largely through the new Electoral Act, or in the case of the FCT, you saw the witch cried last night. The child dies this morning. You saw the nuances, the body language, statements of the minister of the FCT. Then you saw the public holiday that was declared. You saw the curfew, the restriction of movements before the election day proper. And then you ask yourself, to what end were all these shenanigans? And I said clearly that if this administration continues to do this and work this way, they will ultimately undermine democracy. They would have succeeded in nailing the coffin, because as you and I talk, our democracy is clearly in the intensive care unit. Nigerians are largely beginning to disbelieve everything about democracy. Nigerians are largely beginning to say that I'm not interested in the next election. I do not want to go out to vote. And for those who are partisans who think it doesn't matter, I think that they must begin to think again, because democracy loses its life when the people doubt everything about it. So we must begin to try to rebuild our institutions and rework our collective faith in the electoral process.
All right, let's go to the electoral reform and related matters. The INEC chairman, Professor Joash Amupiton, had said publicly that 2027 elections, he can't guarantee 100% perfection, that Nigerians should manage their expectations because that yes, they can deal with electronic transmission of results, but 100% he cannot guarantee that. So is he making excuses for failure even before the election is conducted, or what?
For those who believe in the nuances and the activities of the strategist in power, they call him Mr. Strategy. And if praising surreptition, if praising larceny is the way to go, our children will ask us questions. Because, if in 2014, 2015, we asked for an electoral process that Nigerians and indeed the world will salute, if then we thought that the electoral process can be electronically managed, why is this same party not interested in electronic transmission of results or electronic voting? It simply tells you that we have people who are not interested in doing right. And if at the level of the House of Representatives, they passed a law way back in December, allowing and saying in no uncertain terms that there could be premium time and real-time transmission of election results. What happened between then and now? And if in 2014, 2015, we had less than, the coverage of our telephony was far less than what it is today, then you ask yourself, is it when the technological processes has improved, when we have more network coverages across the country, that we cannot transmit election results electronically? What has changed? And then you ask yourself, again, a very important question, why did the lawmakers reduce the time for release of funds? Then you understand where Amupito is coming from. You also ask yourself, why reduce the period of campaigns? Then you ask yourself, another bobby trap in the new law, so that you understand why Amupito is complaining. It's telling you ahead of time, I may fail, and don't blame me if I fail. That's how bad it is. In that law is a request for parties to submit their election register, their membership register to INEC, which means that the ruling party through the National Assembly is trying to restrict the space. You ask yourself, how many parties will be able to compute and finish the processes of updating their voter registers before the deadline? And then you ask yourself, okay, what if I decide to run tomorrow and the party that I belong to doesn't want to field me and I want to go to another party, like what happened in 2023 when Peter Obi left the PDP and went to the Labour Party. In the present instance, it's going to be almost impossible. Now, what are they trying to do? Disenfranchise the people from the beginning and make sure that they get to power by any means possible. And you have an INEC umpire who is faced with this reality. What is he going to do? you're giving him an alibi for failure. He's saying manage your expectations because the Electoral Act is going to make it almost impossible for me to please you. Invariably, he's also saying that the Electoral Act has made it possible for me to please the ruling party. And so the challenge before us, Victor, as I talk to you, is the fact that, and I say this without fear of querulous critics, that if you follow the letter, that's the new law, you follow the nuances of the ruling party, you follow the proclamations from both chambers of the National Assembly, from the dishonorable members, and from the senators who are largely without distinction, who are not distinguished in any way. If you follow the dramaturgy on the political space, you know that 2027 is rigged. And I think that what we must begin to do as a people is to challenge every process by the day. And because eternal vigilance, they say, is the price for freedom and liberty.
What do you make of the Speaker's position that they decided to go for the hybrid provision in the Electoral Act as electronic transmission and manual because, first and foremost, they don't have Nigeria's internet penetration is very poor, and then secondly, they don't want to disenfranchise anyone, and thirdly, they want to guard against apathy. That these are the reasons why they went for the hybrid.
All lies. Again, all lies. Let me tell you, the right way to go was to have called for expert opinion from INEC. Mahmoud did not deny that he had access. Victor, we had access. Don't forget that in this same country, there was a premium time transmission of federal legislative elections the same day that they jammed the IRF. Don't forget that senators, House of Reps elections, the same day as the presidential election, were transmitted premium time. Don't forget, let's stop allowing these men and their falsehood. All lies, Victor. They lie. Barefacedly, shamelessly, soullessly. INEC has said, and they did say under Mahmoud Yakub, that they had the facilities. Because the beavers, we have heard Mike Guinea, a former INEC commissioner, he said clearly that this story about lack of network is not tenable, that the INEC server and the beavers are correlated. A former INEC commissioner, Festus Okoye, has confirmed that in no certain terms. So you ask yourself, where did they get these words? Where did they get these whole stories about lack of network? It's all about 2027 and the rigging processes, larceny, electoral subterfuge and deceit. It's all about that. There was no need for the hybrid, Victor. All they needed to do, I saw something lately on the social media. Somebody said, if you can collect my taxes electronically, why can't you transmit my votes electronically? These men think, and posterity will hold them harshly, will judge them harshly. If there is anything they must do, they should see how quickly they can right that wrong. Because nobody believes their perfidy, nobody believes their deceit. That position of the speaker is all a dance of shame because there is no tenable result, no tenable facts to substantiate that deceit. That hybrid is simply, Victor, let me tell you what they're saying. We're not ready to transmit election results premium time because we know that the people are opposed to what we're doing in power. We know that we are very likely to lose. And so we don't need people to see how badly we fail. What we must do is ensure that we have a stopgap mechanism where we can go do what Wike did in Rivers, doctor and mutilate election results, do what they have done in Abuja, doctor and mutilate election results, and at the end of the day, when that is done, we can declare ourselves winners. Because don't forget that in the same country, there was premium time transmission of election results in the state of Osun. That was why it was difficult for the Minister of Blue Economy or whatever it's called to return as governor. Adeleke defeated him because they couldn't manipulate the process. And you ask yourself, how did they do the transmission of results? Where did they get networks? From Mars, from Jupiter, or from Saturn? And when you understand that this whole shenanigans and this whole story is about how they can return to power through electoral larceny, through rigging of election results in 2027, you will discountenance their falsehood. They are all liars.
From the democratic point of view, having seen the INEC timetable, what was your immediate reaction? And do you think the timetable is strengthening or weakening democracy?
When the whole process is faulty, you know, my late father taught me something. He said to me, almost always interrogate the entire process. Don't do a piecemeal appraisal of certain. If you look at the whole process, the Electoral Act, the body language of those who signed, albeit quickly, the law, the act into law. You look at the statements from INEC chairman, you look at the provisions, and then you look at the timetable. What you see is a program to diminish, demean, derode, and derobe our democratic processes of consistency, credibility, and integrity. What you see is a political class that has calculated its outcome before the process. What you see is route to the answer. What you see is a democracy that is in trouble. What you see, like your question connotes, is the fact that our democracy is in trouble. Instead of attempting to return life to our democracy, they're taking the oxygen off a democracy in the intensive care unit. And so clearly, they want our democracy dead. And so I want to say without equivocation that the greatest threat to our democracy is the ruling party. The greatest threat to our democracy is the National Assembly, headed by citizen Akpabio. The greatest threat to our democracy is the APC that sees nothing wrong in dismembering credible opposition. The greatest threat to our democracy are those who think that they must stand on a mandate that is largely questionable. They must stand on a mandate that does not care whether Nigerians are safe, that does not care about the mandate. They do not care about a mandate that is unmindful of the reality and the urgency of now. And that's how sad it is. Everything they're doing is deliberately calculated at undermining the credibility and integrity of the 2027 election. And that's why I repeat, I pity Amopiton. And whether he's okay with it, whether he wants posterity to judge him harshly, that's his choice. But I think that this is a time for statesmen to rise up. Statesmen care about the next generation, not necessarily about the next election. And I think that what we must be concerned about is how our children perceive what happens on the political stage, how posterity judges the moment and what has happened and what is going to happen in 2027. And if we truly care, the media, the civil society, and the opposition must unite in asking that our political office holders express some scruples, that our political office holders rise to the urgency of now, that our political office holders save our democracy from the guillotine and ensure that things work rightly. Because if they do not, whatever becomes of the morrow, a highly progressive world will judge them harshly.
Looking at the structure and the timing of the timetable, from your perspective, do you see anything that fundamentally tilts the playing field in favor of the ruling party? And how does the timeline for party primaries affect opposition parties differently from the ruling party?
In so many ways, from the Electoral Act, like I said, to the timetable, as it were, the demand, first thing you must note, is a demand for the submission of the party membership register. And that's why IPAC is raising concerns and asking that there must be an overhaul of the timetable due to how it affects submission, electronic submission of register of the parties. The ruling party is interested in ensuring that people who are strong candidates are not able to move from one party to the other and get the ticket to run against the ruling party. And that's one of the ways that they have emerged narrowing down the space. Then the timeline for the space for campaigns, reducing the number of days of campaign obviously works against the opposition parties and favors the ruling party that's already campaigning. And then largely, if you look at the period for submission of, like I said, funding, INEC can claim that, oh, we don't have enough materials, the time was short, this, that, and then we cannot. But don't forget that the ruling party is already on ground. They're far gone with their registration processes. They're far gone with their congresses. And the opposition parties and the smaller parties haven't started. And so the whole process is, like I said, rule to the answer. They had this whole thing planned out. And INEC, unfortunately, I don't want to accuse Amopiton, may have been an unwilling partner in this whole gamut of pre-planned election larceny. But clearly, everything has been staged for the ruling party. And perhaps that is why, for survival, almost all the governors are decamping to the APC. Perhaps that is why, for survival, albeit selfishly, almost all the lawmakers are decamping to the ruling party. Perhaps that is why Nigeria is increasingly becoming a one-party state, because from the body language of the electoral umpire to the letters of the new Electoral Act, everything appears tailored to favor the ruling party. That's the tragedy of it all. And like I said, Victor, if nothing is done early enough, the 2027 election lacks credibility and stands rigged. And I'm saying that with all commitment, with all verve, nerve, and tissue and sinews in my body, with my soul fixed on truth. I'm saying that if nothing is done early enough, and if nothing gives, the APC will largely return to power across our country, and we'll have a one-party state, because the entire process has been stage managed to favor them.
What do you make of the argument that the opposition itself has also not done well in terms of challenging the APC, providing alternatives for Nigerians, and of course, also mapping out their own strategy in the light of what we've seen? We can take, for example, even the Electoral Act mobilization. Everybody seemed to have just, the opposition seemed to have relaxed, assuming that maybe the ordinary Nigerians should just go out there and just make the noise while they ensconce in their offices and houses and probably watch on telly while the National Assembly is...
Let me surprise you, Victor. Let me surprise you, Victor. Nothing is further from the truth than that line of thought. Victor, we have never seen in recent history the kind of mobilization ditto the electoral law. We've never seen it. Even under Buhari, that we thought was a sadist and a stubborn man, we didn't mobilize like we did lately. People were sleeping at the National Assembly. People were pushing. The civil society came together, pushed certain provisions. We even had a draft sent to the National Assembly. The opposition wasn't lame about the whole process. The whole process was manipulated by Akpabio and his men. You saw the voting process. You saw it on live TV. I have refused to allow the deceit and the treachery and the debauchery of political office holders hold sway. We will debunk their falsehood. Victor, Nigerians mobilized. The opposition mobilized. As much as getting the House of Representatives to pass the law the way we wanted it. It was Akpabio and his Senate that bungled the hopes and the aspirations of the Nigerian people. That should be well stated. It was roguery by a rogue Senate, headed by a rogue Senate president. That was what happened.
That's a hard one. That's a hard
No,
one.
but that's the truth.
That's a hard one.
That's the truth. They came and doctored and messed up everything. So it's not about the opposition. Now, what do you want the opposition to do? They protested, they went to the National Assembly, and what happened? They were shot at. Don't forget, the optics are there. They were shot at. As much as the Speaker of the House of Representatives coming out to apologize, they were shot at. The optics are there. So it is not so much about, we have never seen in our historicity, particularly this modern democracies in 1999, the graphic and barefaced disruption of protests. Now we have a new industry. When you have the opposition marshalling out its point and protesting, this government pays counter-protesters. It's the new business in town. That's how bad it has become. We have protest for and protest against. Now, the new business in town is falsehood, debauchery, and deceit. The new trade in town is that they want to gaslight the people. I heard people say, oh, blame the opposition. How do you blame the opposition when the EFCC, the ICPC, and the state DSS are wound to being teleguided against the opposition? How do you blame the opposition? How many cases does my brother and friend Shore have in courts today? How do you blame the opposition when increasingly you see a presidency and a ruling party that is targeting vibrant voices? Some people have asked me, Chris, why haven't they come for you? And I said, if they come against truth, I will shout even louder. I'm not a coward. You prove to me. If you summon me, prove to me and tell me where I have lied or defamed anybody. And then when you do that, you take me to court. But cowardice is not in my makeup. I tell people proudly from when I was 15 that the day I was born, fear died. I will not be cowed. I will not stop saying the truth. But what is important here is that we must note and cut the opposition some slacks. This government is consistently weaponizing state agencies against the opposition. This government is consistently narrowing down the space of protestation. This government is consistently stifling the right to dissent. And this government is consistently mortifying, if you like, and killing democracy.
All right. As the convener of Country First Movement, what concrete actions is your movement planning in response vis-a-vis town hall meetings, legal action, mass sensitization?
That's what we're doing. You know, for me, it's about our country. And let me also, for the purposes of our listeners, say here that understanding that the birth of a nation that we truly want will not only come through mass sensitization, will not only come through protests and protestations, but through a studied approach of educating our people, but through active leadership engagement, through deepening the fabrics and frontiers of our democracy. We have a registered party, Democratic Leadership Alliance, which arguably is about the only ideologically oriented. Go check it out on our website, www.dlanigeria.org, and see. It's an ideological party. We're not necessarily concerned about the immediate election. We're thinking about deepening the frontiers of leadership, teaching our young people to, to aspire, because it's a shame that the worst of us is ruling over the best of us. And so we're concerned about leadership recruitment and working along with members of the Country First movement across the country. We're engaging our people and saying to them, it is not just about blaming. We must be active in the recruitment processes. We must be active in engaging leaders. And interestingly, Victor, I want to say here, and this is for posterity and indeed our listeners, that it is true that sometimes people are as good as those who govern them. And mark my choice of words, sometimes. And that sometimes is when we allow sycophants, court jesters, determine the extent of our participation in leadership. When we give up, when we watch those who do not care about our country run roughshod, not only on our political space, but mess up our minds such that we begin to doubt our abilities to transform our country. So what we're doing is educating our people and asking them to be critical stakeholders in the process of governance. What we're doing is to inform and educate our people and tell them, almost in the words of Mitt Romney, that leadership must show the way. And, unfortunately, what this government and those who speak for this government are doing is to tell the people, and that was what Lai Mohammed did when they came in, that change begins with them. But truly, all over the world, leadership is a pyramid, and leaders must show the way. Unfortunately, we're living in a country where the narrative is being skewed against the people, and you hear people say, okay, what are the people doing? For what reason did you ask to be made a leader? Is it not to show the way? And so the time has come, and that's what we're doing, to return the blame and put them rightly, and to ask people to look our leaders in the eyes and say to them, you have failed, and the time to pack your baggages and leave our government houses is now. I believe that structurally, it's not about agonizing. We are organizing along with interested individuals to build a nation that works for all of us. And I know it's not an easy task, but Victor, God on the side of the Nigerian people and the masses of our nation, we shall truly and indeed bet a republic that works for all of us.
Lastly, if nothing changes and the timetable stands the way it is, what is your honest prediction for 2027 elections and the future of the opposition in Nigeria?
If nothing changes, if we're unable to, pardon my choice of word, force INEC and the National Assembly to do right, or to revisit quickly the law that empowers the ruling party to rig, the law that empowers INEC to fail, then our democracy is in trouble. Then the opposition will be forced to the trenches. Then my worries and fears for our country becomes even more deepened and stronger. And then those who worry that democracy might die in Africa's largest nation become clairvoyants. And so I truly care about our country, and I hope that the prophets of doom do not dance in the village square as those who were indeed realistic and those who had mystical powers. I hope they prove us wrong. I hope that the APC rises to the urgency of now. And I hope that Mr. President understands that congruent with democratic processes is the freeness and the fairness of the electoral process, and congruent with democracy is the plurality of choices, and congruent with democracy is a freedom not only to participate, but to effectively criticize the ruling party and to differ and have the right to dissent. And I hope that those who are celebrating the narrowing down of our political space understands this reality, and together walk the path of patriotism and protect our country, our democracy, and the right to disagree.